Which fictional hero isn't actually all that good? Hello everyone, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, be sure to do so and we'll get you started. Story 1. Vast majority of the characters mentioned were never intended to be portrayed as typical heroes. Characters like House, Frank Castle, Yagami Light, and Walter White are not meant to be heroes, and anyone that actually pays attention to the media they are in would not idolize them. They all range from anti-heroes to just plain villains that happen to be the main character. Story 2. I'm going to get hate for this, but Robin Williams' character in Mrs. Doubtfire. Dude was a shitty husband and father, and when he was given very fair visitation rights, he decided to ignore them and deceive his entire family. That's insane. Also, he vandalized his ex's boyfriend's car and almost killed him, and the boyfriend was a genuinely nice person who was good to his kids. That is psycho behavior. Story 3. Wanda in WandaVision. She holds an entire town physically and psychically hostage in a fantasy world she created, so she wouldn't have to deal with her trauma. She is aware of the suffering she is causing, but does it anyway. When she releases the town, it's treated as a selfless sacrifice, when really she held hundreds of people in a mental prison for months, and only stopped when she was forced to. Story 4. Punisher. Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, is a prime example of how a hero doesn't care about the lives of others, even villains. The good news is that for the most part, his crusade is directed against crime. The Punisher does not experience the slightest wavering of conscience and sends his opponents to the next world in batches. This is his main motivation that has driven him for years. Moreover, he believes in what he is doing so much that he is not even affected by the punishing gaze of the Ghost Rider. Story 5. Han Solo might seem like the ultimate rebel hero, but let's not forget he started out as a self-serving scoundrel. Dude was all about smuggling and dodging debts until he got roped into the whole rebellion gig. Sure, he came through in the end, but let's not ignore his shady past. Still, gotta give him props for his charisma and that iconic blaster. So yeah, Han's more of a gray area hero, but hey, that's what makes him interesting, right? Story 6. Parks and Rec is known to be a heartwarming, feel-good show, and that aspect of it is extremely difficult to reconcile against just how fucking poorly they treat Gary. It's not just good-natured ribbing. They actively bully him and create a horrible work environment for him. The only reason he doesn't seem to notice is that he's some kind of Zen master or something, like the show overall, but that part of it has not aged well whatsoever. So I guess this answer would be most of the main ensemble of Parks and Rec. Story 7. Big Trouble in Little China that Jack Burton pretty much gets beat up the entire movie until the showdown with Lopan, where his excellent hand-eye coordination saves him, which was well set up earlier. He is really just along for the ride with his buddy beating up most of the guys. I love that movie. Story 8. Albus Dumbledore. I didn't even have to wait until the final books to be told. It was fairly obvious from the start, certainly by POA. You mean to tell me that Albus, whom James Potter trusted with his family heirloom, wouldn't have known who the family's secret keeper was? Yet he let Sirius rot in Azkaban for 12 years, never spoke a word in his defense against the Wizengamot Albus himself led. I truly believe his only problem with Riddle is that Riddle accomplished what Albus couldn't. Story 9. Light Yagami from Death Note. While initially seen as a hero trying to rid the world of criminals using the Death Note, his actions become increasingly morally questionable, as he manipulates and kills not only criminals, but also innocent people who stand in his way, ultimately becoming more of an anti-hero or even a villain. Story 10. Most illegal or unethical actions by a hero would be deemed unacceptable in real life. I think it's one of the reasons some stray from fiction as they get older. Depending on your life experiences, watching a hero mow down a group of nondescript bad guys just becomes less pleasant. Story 11. Romeo. He's immature and impulsive. He is pining for Rosalind, then dumps the thought of her the minute he sees Juliet. He is a hothead who kills Tybalt and sets he and Juliet on the path that leads to their deaths. Meanwhile, Juliet is the one calmly making plans and figuring out their way forward. I read the play again with my high school student a couple of years ago and came away feeling really sorry for Paris. There's a case to be made that he was just a normal guy who was trying to go about courting Juliet in the correct way. He was talking to her father, and then after she died, he went to her tomb to show respect and gets killed for his trouble. Story 12. Yoda was a piece of shit coward. He fled the temple while it burned, while children fought back, while children faced death holding on to the thought and hope that they just had to survive long enough for their masters to get to them, to help them. Edit. As someone pointed out, I got my timelines mixed up. I thought the Senate chamber fight was the same time as the temple attack. Pie in the face. Story 13. Not really a hero, but Jenny from Forrest Gump. Movie. Basically friend-zoned Forrest, but then teasing him with the hope of a relationship, only to up and disappear. This happened a few times. And then she got sick and decided to finally throw him a bone and marry him, and secure a future for their son before she dies. Funny thing is that Jenny in the book Forrest Gump is the opposite. She is much more level-headed and just wants Forrest to be with her. But Forrest is the one who keeps leaving for his adventures. Until one day he came home and she was gone and took their son. Another horrible person is Paul Rudd's character in the movie The Birdcage. Pretty much wanted his dad to lie about being gay when they met his fiance's family, act more straight and hide his partner from them. And when his dad's partner breaks down and basically apologizes for being who they are, Paul Rudd's character brushes them off with no remorse or feelings other than being annoyed. He is the absolute villain of that movie. Edit. It was Dan Futterman, not Paul Rudd. Story 14. One fictional hero, who isn't as morally upright as they may seem, is Batman. While he fights crime and protects Gotham City, his methods often involve vigilante justice, which skirts the line between heroism and lawlessness. Additionally, his brooding nature and tendency to operate outside the law raise questions about his true motivations and the consequences of his actions. Story 15. Jubilee from the X-Men. She shoots fireworks out of her hands, which means that she needs backup from her other teammates in every violent encounter she has with an evil mutant or sentinel. The goofiest mismatch I ever saw was Jubilee blasting Juggernaut in the face with fireworks. He was totally unfazed. Story 16. Gordon Bombay is an absolute horror show of a person. He openly mocks a judge and opposing counsel, gets caught drinking and driving, is then furious his boss gives him 6 months paid leave to sort it out. He drives a limo full of kids across a frozen lake, teaches them to cheat, and then bangs a player's mom. He steals banks from his friends on a technicality, and absolutely takes a run at the local Pee-wee hockey coach. All because he hit a post on a penalty shot, and then the entire team lost in overtime. Story 17. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is kind of a shitty guy. He has a good heart, but it's questionable how easily he swings towards bad decisions. He goes from being a total coward to extremely arrogant with little to no trigger. Good people don't just randomly turn shitty over practically nothing. Story 18. I think for me it'd be Blaze from Blaze and the Monster Machines. Like, isn't what he's doing just as much cheating as what Crusher does? Also, after some time you start to somewhat sympathize with Crusher, because Blaze wins like every single race. Like, where's the fun if the same person wins every single time? Story 19. There's a case for Hulk Hogan, the character, not Terry Bollea. He pretty much hated any kind of foreigner, got himself involved in other people's business, and cheated to win over and over. Then he left a company and hated that nobody cheered for him there and went bad. The NWO. Story 20. Superman. I know that he's evolved, but the version I grew up with, he was basically invincible, aside from an element that is extraordinarily rare. Why was the rest of the Justice League even needed? Why send Batman to do anything when Superman can use his lightning speed to do it? Every movie or show should only last a few minutes. The second that the bad guys are revealed, it should only take Superman about 4 seconds to round them up. Story 21. Lots of them, Lamau. I'd say having more than one side to the character is but one of many signs of good writing. Someone whose ideal is boring as hell. You do not expect anything new or interesting from said character. Now a hero, who either has a darker side to them or has to struggle with morally ambiguous choices, and sometimes even not picking the right one, or doing bad thing for a good reason. Such characters are richer and more believable than just plain, I'm a saint, haven't done anything wrong in my life. Now there's also an entirely different category of characters apparently doing the right thing, but due to writing being either lazy or just very shallow, when you analyze what they do and what they fight for, you realize, WTF, those guys might not be worse than antagonists, but I sure wouldn't want them to win either. Story 22. Optimus Prime. I don't think the writers even intended him to be, but he's often seen as the hero, even though he'd let his entire planet be destroyed to save some human kid. He kills a defeated enemy that offers a truce. He goes from valuing human life to obsession, basically the good guy turning mad. Story 23. Can I give an example in the opposite direction? The main antagonist in Billy Madison is literally a great human. He's trying to keep a company that employs thousands of people out of the hands of a lazy moron, and forces Billy to grow as a human in the process. Not all heroes wear capes. Story 24. Mizu from Blue-Eyed Samurai. She doesn't go after a drug lord because he is a drug lord or a bad person. She does it because she hates the fact she was born. Characters keep thinking there is something deeper to her revenge story, and that she must have a good reason for the lengths she goes through, or that she must be a good person. They make it seem like she was forced into a path of revenge, and she had no other options. Then her extended backstory reveal shows that isn't true. She is just an angry person who hates the fact she was ever born at all. She had several opportunities for a better life, but actively chose to hunt people down instead. She made her life goal to kill 4 people she never met and knows nothing about besides one of them might be her dad. I get that's supposed to be the tragedy element, but it doesn't feel tragic when the character actively chooses to suffer. Story 25. Batman. Dude had childhood trauma that created a personality where he is Batman. Bruce Wayne is the fake persona. Then he beats up criminals but never stops the super criminals, allowing them to kill again, and often to try to toy with Batman or piss Batman off. Story 26. Indiana Jones. Nothing he does changes anything. He has terrible interpersonal skills, is a neglectful father, has no academic rigor, has zero acumen for doing what is required by an archaeologist. He uses people, including children, then discards them when he is done, leaving an emotional tire fire after him. Basically, he is a piece of human trash. Story 27. The Emperor of Mankind. The entire Imperium crumbled and now is in a state of perpetual civil war because he was a megalomaniac and a shitty father. Also, before the Horus Heresy, he slaughtered countless innocent Xeno races and endless planets of humans who wouldn't bow to his will. Story 28. Kaneda from Akira is pretty much not a true hero for the majority of Akira. Haseo from Dot Hack is also a huge dick, though I honestly stopped playing around Vol 2. Not sure if he gets better, but he really wasn't a hero. Just an asshole who was good at what he did. Story 29. Probably won't be familiar to the few who read this, but I have to say it. Hiro Yui from Gundam Wing. I've been rewatching the series on Hulu 20+ years after I first saw it, and Hiro, the main protagonist, is absolutely bonkers. It's a running joke in the Gundam fandom. In the first few episodes alone, he blows his cover on his super-secret stealth mission to shoot down a civilian shuttle that he could have easily avoided. Lost his top-of-the-line death machine to a far inferior death machine, failed to blow himself up, openly threatened the most popular girl in the school he was supposed to be blending into, sunk his death machine to the bottom of the sea again, and patted himself on the back for it all, saying, "Mission accomplished." Morals aside, that is a boatload of failure for a protagonist, especially within the first 2 or 3 episodes, especially for a guy who is touted in the series as the perfect soldier. Story 30. Spider-Man in the TASM films is not a hero. He's immense. He belittles Flash. He acts like an asshole to Uncle Ben. It doesn't even feel like he likes the guy. Unlike Toby, who, despite also lashing out at him after the Great Responsibility speech, it's still like both before and after then that he still genuinely loved his uncle. He only becomes Spider-Man out of revenge. He acts like a jackass when dealing with criminal. Even implies if the guy he caught carjacking was the man who killed Uncle Ben, he would be dead. What's worse is that he doesn't learn his lesson at the end of the first film at all, and doesn't keep George Stacy's promise in the slightest. In the second film, it's even worse. He lets civilians die whole. He's too busy quibbing and acting like even more of a jackass. He refuses to help his friend Harry. He inadvertently leads his GF to her death, and he wastes time getting a fire hose and fire hat when he should be stopping Electro. The hose I get, but why did you need the freaking hat? The runner-up spots go to Elsa from Frozen, Oscar from Shark Tale, and while not the hero or main character of the film, Triton from The Littler Mermaid. Starting with Elsa, she froze her whole goddamn kingdom, which I can kind of understand, being locked up her whole life and all, but it's still pretty messed up. Then she shots ice blasts to her sister's heart, nearly killing her. And then in the second movie, despite everything her sister did for her, she brushes her to the side to deal with her problems on her own, rather than allowing others to help her. And then she decides to just drop all her responsibilities onto said sister, just because she's happier in the forest and its people and weird spirit things she only knew for like a few days tops. Or she has to because she's immortal, or whatever the hell the ending of the second film is trying to freaking imply. Either way, IDC what anyone tells me, and IDC if she's admittedly hot and beautiful either, Elsa is a selfish bitch. Okay, fine, I'll admit that was a bit harsh. I went a little too far saying that, I'll not lie, but still, She ain't no hero, is all I'm trying to say. It's still crazy that Once Upon a Time show wrote her better. Then there's Triton, who was so arrogant and narrow-minded that he destroyed his own daughter's collection of stuff they clearly meant a lot to her, and was way too overprotective, and basically pushed her to basically get tricked by Ursula into becoming human. And then there's Oscar the Shark Slayer. I don't need to explain why he's a villain and not a hero, so the less said about him the better. Story 31. Noah from the Notebook. A selfish, obsessed, manipulative loser who forced the woman he loved into going out with him by threatening suicide. Then he put her in clear danger, challenging her to lay down in the middle of a street. Anytime she refused him or tried to leave, he berated her and told her he knew her better and what she wanted. He alienated her from her family and from her fiancé, who was an actually good man, who was supportive of her and let her have her space and do whatever she dreamed. I hate Noah and that book and movie with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. Anyone who thinks he is a good guy probably hasn't been in a relationship with someone who regularly threatened to kill themselves in order to get the behavior they want from you. Story 32, Batman. Beats the absolute snot out of petty criminals and puts the real threats into the revolving door that is Arkham. Oh, I won't kill, but I will ruin your life with $300K in medical bills. Repeatedly trains children to do the same and gets mad when they don't do exactly what he says and find a healthier way. He says he's trying to help, but maybe consider therapy. Keeps files on how to kill all of his friends. Thinks he should just because he's Batman. When they get stolen and used against them, does it stop him? No. Literally endangers cities, worlds, and universes to get what he wants or thinks is best. Is not sorry about it. Blames others and rakes them over the coals if they do the same. Or less. The one time he did have power, he just about went nuts and took everything over, despite constantly being against that, and the Red Sun and Injustice storylines being about him fighting that very power system. Yet, he always has insight, and can tell everyone else what to do. Why? Because he's Batman. Because he's, in conclusion, always be yourself, unless you can be Batman. Then be anyone but Batman. Story 33. I would say Luke Skywalker. He definitely isn't bad, and he is arguably still a hero, but many of his actions are questionable. Instead of trying to understand, address, or work around any of Ben Solo's darkness and problems, he ignited his lightsaber on his own nephew while he was sleeping. This led Ben to become Kylo Ren, which led to a cascade of bad events to happen in the galaxy. He lied to Rey about what really happened with Ben Solo. He initially framed the situation as if Ben attacked him first. He abandoned the Resistance and exiled himself on a remote planet for years because he was depressed. This decision prevented him from helping the galaxy much earlier during a time of crisis. He pretty much turned his back on everyone he cared about, and his absence made it easier for the First Order to thrive. He is extremely impatient. He failed and abandoned Yoda's training on Dagobah and later gave up on training Rey. Blew up the Death Star. This one is very refutable, but I'll add it anyway. Sure, he needed to do this in order to save the rebels and other planets from destruction, but he killed hundreds of thousands of people in the process. Granted, many of these things are a result of bad writing in the sequel trilogy. He is much more of a hero in the